Good afternoon, everyone. Real pleasure to be here at the 8th edition of TechManch. Truly delighted to be speaking here today. And the topic that I want to spend some time with all of you on is future of payments. What makes this topic quite exciting is the fact that payments in the last 5, 6, 7 years has probably seen more change, more disruption than in the 50 years preceding that. And that pace of change is only accelerating. And as to the future of payments and the future of commerce, a colleague of mine by the name of Jack Forrestal, who's our Visa's Chief Product and Strategy Officer, he says something which I love to quote: the future of payments and commerce is already here, is just not evenly distributed. And I will unpack that as we go through this talk, because obviously the way we experience payments, the way we experience innovation in payments varies from country to country, varies from use case to use case. But a lot of what I'm going to speak about is present today in the world and is, as I said, kind of accelerating at a very, very rapid pace. Now let's start with India for starters. The India story in payment stands apart, and a lot has been written about it. And I think it's important for all of us to understand that the India story in payments is not just one about innovation, disruption, transformation. The real story of evolution of payments in India is about inclusion. And why do I say that? There's a gentleman called Pramod Verma who works very closely with Nandan Nilekani, who's obviously one of the architects of the India stack. And Pramod explained to us at a recent Visa event very articulately that the fact that in 7 odd years, we've gone from a very low penetration of banking to a scenario where well over 90% of India is now banked. That's a phenomenal statistic. You add to that the fact that today there are about 500 million Indians who use digital payments in some shape or form across different form factors. And that's another very, very large number. So the fact that we have 90+% banking penetration, the fact that we have 500 million users of digital payments, and all of this transformation has happened predominantly in the last 6 or 7 years, starting with demonetization, the impact of GST, what happened through COVID, and so on and so forth. Now, the Bank of International Settlements and the World Bank and a number of other global agencies reckon that any other nation, economy, or cohort may have typically taken 5 decades to achieve this level of penetration of banking, penetration of digital payments. And yes, that's not a mistake. 5 decades equates to 50 years, and India has achieved that in 7 years. So it's quite unprecedented, the pace of this adoption that has happened in India. And truly, while many countries digitize payments for the banked population, India effectively reimagined payments for everyone. And the instant payments that we have today across multiple platforms, UPI obviously is the most commonly used platform, but IMPS, NEFT, RTGS, this is the blueprint for the world. Blueprint not just in terms of the cost, in terms of interoperability, in terms of ubiquity, in terms of the fact that it is available on a real-time basis to users 365 days in a year, 24/7. There are many developed economies out there which do not have a comparable payments infrastructure like India. And given that we are soon approaching nearly 1 billion transactions a day in digital payments, this is truly digitization at unprecedented scale. Switching for a moment to the role of companies like Visa in this, we've been present in India for about 40 years, evolving alongside this fairly incredible market and marrying, sort of our global expertise, global products, technology, solutions with the local insights, the local market nuances, because India is not just for payments, but in every sector or industry unique in many respects. And a lot of people kind of think of Visa and associate us with credit cards, debit cards, and prepaid cards, and in some instances, commercial cards, which are used for B2B payments. And truly, that is the bedrock of our business. But there's a lot more to what we do than that. And that's, again, an evolution that is happening very, very quickly, very, very rapidly in terms of us as an organization. For starters, like many other multinationals, we have a global technology center, which happens to be in Bangalore, and we have over 5,500 employees there, building technology for India, as well as building technology for the world. So some of our most cutting-edge products and applications when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to core products, when it comes to money movement, is getting created out of our Bangalore Tech Center, which also happens to be the largest employee base that we have in a single location, pretty much anywhere in the world. The other area which is of relevance and importance is cybersecurity. At the heart of digitization and at the heart of payments is trust. And one of the key sort of imperatives and one of the key things that companies like us focus on is building trust and making the payments ecosystem more secure. And thus, as a company, over a period of the last 5 or 6 years, we have invested in excess of $10–11 billion in cybersecurity and fraud prevention. And we then work back with regulators, government agencies, law enforcement agencies, the banks, the fintechs, in creating solutions that protects the users of digital payments. Closer home, we signed a MOU with the Rashtriya Raksha University in Gujarat to advance cyber education. And the audience for this includes students, it includes professionals who work in companies, as well as, again, the law enforcement agencies. And the idea is to help the university co-create curriculum and provide, again, latest tools and techniques to train people to combat digital threats. We then also look at working with governments. Very recently, the government of Goa launched a prepaid card scheme where they want to empower local residents of Goa at first, and subsequently even people traveling into Goa to use these cards for all types of payments locally when they are visiting Goa. And the idea behind this partnership with the Goa government and Seva Technologies is to, again, further digital payments, financial literacy, as well as financial security. As part of RBI's initiatives, one of the big things that has happened in India is card-on-file tokenization. What does that mean for an average person? Today, over 60% of the usage of cards is not in face-to-face transactions alone. It is actually in what we call card not present, which is in the online world. Every time you get on to Swiggy or Zomato or Book My Show or Flipkart or Amazon or any other e-commerce platform, you are effectively not using that card in a face-to-face transaction, you're using it in the online e-commerce world. And when that happens in India, all cards actually are tokenized and the transactions work on a token. Therefore, these merchants don't actually save and store card numbers. And that's a very, very critical mandate from the RBI, which makes your credentials more secure. So we as Visa have issued more than 450 million such tokens, and the number goes up every day and counting, so that every time a card holder goes onto an e-commerce site and they use a token, that data, the confidential data of the card, 16-digit card PAN, the CVV number, the expiry date, and all those other important information fields are not held with the merchant. They are in fact tokenized. That makes the transaction secure, and then when you do transactions in a tokenized format, it also leads to superior payment success rates and payment experiences. So that's been a big move. By the way, India is the only country in the world, or rather the first country in the world, that made card-on-file tokenization a mandatory step. And in that sense, we kind of set the pace in the world. Now, besides cybersecurity, tokenization, which is all about trust and security, the other aspect of combating fraud and digital threats is financial education and financial literacy. And that is equally important. That has to go sort of hand in hand, because if people actually compromise their security, their passwords and their, whatever makes their transactions secure, then it becomes very difficult to combat the scams and frauds that are happening. So you do need to kind of have various measures on security, but you equally need to educate people on financial literacy and other aspects of using digital payments. And to further that, we've kind of adopted 1,000 villages across the country, across 18 states in the country, where we have a digital village education program. And through this outreach, about 50,000 people, more than 50% of whom are women, have actually been trained in terms of financial literacy. We're also partnering the Tourism and Hospitality Skill Council to upskill 20,000 youth in this country to work in the tourism sector. This is again a very interesting sort of focus area for us. It's a focus area for the government, because tourism brings in valuable foreign exchange and it is a huge source of employment. It's an interesting area because tourism is an area where digital payments also gets amplified. When people come into this country from across the world, they are most likely to use the form of payments that they are most comfortable with in their home market. So it becomes really important for us to make sure that forms of payment that are accepted globally are also accepted in India, and it is also secure. So both from a acceptance standpoint as well as from a security standpoint, tourism gets a huge boost, a huge fillip as you implement more and more digital payment forms and more digital payment methods in the country, and that's an area which we are focused on. This is a very unique market in many respects, as I alluded to earlier. We now have in India about 1 billion debit cards. We also have about 110 million credit cards in this country. Having said that, only 1 in 10 debit cards are monthly active. In fact, in many instances, the active rate of debit cards is even lower because a lot of people don't know or don't use the debit cards for the purpose that it is actually out there. So there is a whole education and activation effort that needs to go into making debit cards more used in the country. People do have them. The moment you open a bank account, you get a debit card, but a lot of people kind of don't use it beyond withdrawals from ATM machines, and as the usage of cash is coming down, even that use case is becoming less and less relevant, especially in the metros. But we do have 1 billion debit cards out there, and if we can actually help people understand different use cases for that, there is a way to get those cards to be more active. On the credit side, while the number of 110 million credit cards might sound a bit impressive, it is also important to note that China has about 1 billion credit cards. So they have 10 times as much as credit cards as India does. Brazil has maybe 4 times as much credit cards with a much smaller population. Of these 110 million credit cards, only about 50% are unique. Rather, I would say about 50 million unique people have a credit card. That in a country of 1.4 billion means that we have significant under-penetration when it comes to credit cards. And there is a huge opportunity, therefore, to expand the penetration of credit cards. We reckon 150 million people in this country who are credit worthy, who have some kind of credit history, don't actually have a credit card. And that's a task ahead of us as networks, but even more so the banks and non-bank finance companies and fintechs to sort of address and to get the penetration, the democratization of credit, in a manner of speaking, to the level where it ought to be compared to our international peer countries. And for all the success we have had and all the stats that I've been throwing at you over the last 20 odd minutes, we are still a 50% cash economy. So 50% of personal consumption expenditure in India is still cash. The moment you step away from the metros and the mini metros, the use of cash becomes even more prevalent than it is here. So many of us sitting in this room probably don't remember the last time we used cash, or the last time we went to an ATM machine to make a withdrawal. But that is certainly not the case for Bharat. That might be the case in Mumbai. So the next 5 years, we believe there's about $700 billion of cash which needs to be displaced with digital payments. And it doesn't matter whether that is UPI, credit cards, other forms of payments. Eventually, if India opens up to things like stablecoin and so on and so forth. But the important thing is cash needs to get displaced. $700 billion of cash still to be displaced in the next 5-6 years. And we have about, in fact, a lot of the stats show that even post demonetization, the absolute volume of cash that is circulating out there is even more than what it was pre-demonetization. So we've achieved a lot, but there is still significant cash that needs to get displaced. There are significant use cases where digital payments haven't quite permeated the way they should. And a classic example of that is transit payments. When you get onto a train in Mumbai or a BST bus or a auto rickshaw and a taxi, if it's not Uber or Ola, you're probably still defaulting to using cash or some form of stored value payment in a pass. We've not migrated or graduated to what's there in London, New York, Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Dubai, where you can just pull out a card issued anywhere in the world, tap and pay. And frankly, you don't even need to pull out a card. You might actually have your card credentials stored in your mobile phone, and you just tap and pay. And for anyone who's experienced the frictionless convenience of transit payments in cities like London, cities like Singapore, there is no comparison to that. It's a question of like literally 6 to 7 seconds. There's no latency, there is no queues, and it's just so convenient, because gone are the days when as a tourist or a foreigner, if you land in that country, you have to go to a money exchange, or you have to buy some kind of a plastic and store money in that plastic, and then when you're flying back, you're worried about how much money is left over in your card, and how do you burn that. So you just take your India issued card, land up in Singapore, and start using it as if you were a local, and theoretically the vice versa should apply as well. So when it comes to credit penetration, when it comes to cash displacement, when it comes to very specific use cases like transit payments, there's so much opportunity for us even today to displace cash, make payments seamless, frictionless, convenient, intuitive, on the mobile or any other device. Somebody might choose to keep it on the phone, mobile, watch, jewelry, all of that is possible. And I think, again, when it comes to cross-border payments, for all the Indian students studying overseas, people going on travel, people still default to carrying cash. And the irony is that in many countries you can't use cash. If you go to, you go shopping in many countries, there is self-checkout today. There is no cashier. And in those self-checkout machines, they don't even accept cash. You have to make payments through digital means, but everybody sort of at the back of their mind feels that, hey, if I'm traveling abroad, I need to have some cash in my wallet just in case of an emergency. Nothing wrong with that. There are extreme situations when that might come in handy, and someone gave me an example. There was a power outage in Spain a couple of weeks back when for 18 hours, parts of Spain lost power. Now, obviously, if you have an extreme situation like that, cash does become handy because digital payments may not work, your phone may not be charged, and so on and so forth. But barring those edge cases, barring those extreme situations, we still have a tendency in the country to default to carrying cash when traveling abroad, or we haven't quite achieved that same level of efficiency and friction-free payment experiences when it comes to cross-border payments, when money has to be brought into India or sent out of India. So what's it that India needs to do? How can companies like Visa, working back with the regulator, the government, and wider set of stakeholders, do to enable India to get to the next level when it comes to digital financial empowerment? I think first and foremost, like I was alluding to the fact that we have to make payments even more interoperable, even more universal, even more unified, even more inclusive. And that inherently means that we need to have competition, competition between local and international, competition between banks and fintechs, competition between different payment aggregators, facilitators, ecosystem participants. So competition is really good for payments because it not only brings cost, it drives innovation, it creates optionality, multiple rails, multiple platforms. The last thing we want as a country is a concentration risk where if one platform or one payment form is down, the whole country comes to a standstill. We cannot afford that. The country is too large, too complex, and even with 50% of our payments having moved to digital, you can't afford for that system to be not available whenever people need it. The second thing is, when it comes to the future of payments and commerce, is this whole phenomenon of artificial intelligence, machine learning. What is this going to do? How is this going to change what we do today, and how are things going to look 5 years from now? So there is one part of payments where AI and ML is very widely used, and that is to combat fraud, to combat in terms of developing risk tools. But the real future, or the real delta that we see incremental to what is happening, is in shopping, is in commerce. How agents or agentic AI is going to change shopping experiences. Even today, the shopping experience on Amazon, Flipkart is pretty intuitive, pretty convenient, but that's going to change dramatically as well. The way you would plan a holiday, the way you would compare across different platforms, where do you find the best product for you, at what price, is all going to be driven by agents. It doesn't mean that you won't have a choice in the matter. You will pick which agent will choose on your behalf. You still may need to make that final decision yourself, but that whole journey of searching, of comparing, of stack ranking one versus the other based on individual preferences is going to change. And for companies like Visa, it is extremely important to make the payment experience so beautifully embedded in that shopping experience that it doesn't feel like two sort of discrete actions. So if you're making shopping and commerce super intuitive on the back of agentic AI, then payment needs to move lockstep with that, because the last thing you want is having this absolutely fabulous shopping and commerce experience, but then the payment experience is kind of broken, or it's not as intuitive. So that's a big part of where we see the future of payments going, in terms of how payment systems, payment operators embed themselves with agentic AI over and above and in addition to whatever is happening on the part of using AI and ML in terms of combating risk and fraud. And the last point I'd kind of say is credit expansion. For this country to truly get the best out of payments, digitization, it's also not just enough to have democratization of payments, which has happened in India to a large extent with 500 million users, but it's clearly not sufficient then that democratization of payments doesn't lead to a democratization of responsible credit, financial inclusion. That 500 million users should also then be beneficiaries of using digital payments by getting affordable credit. And as I said, when it comes to credit cards, barely 50 million people have them. When it comes to other forms of unsecured loans from formal institutions, there might be another 25, 30 million incremental people who have it. But that's a big distance between 500 million users and 50, 60, 70 million people who actually have access to formal credit in this country. So that's a huge gap that needs to be bridged. So I'd like to end by saying payments is an exciting space. Technology is rapidly accelerating change and disruption there. It is dramatically impacting financial inclusion. Having said that, India has some distance to cover. We've made incredible progress in the last 7 years, but we have some distance to cover. The future of payments and commerce is already here. Some of it is obvious and visible, some of it is not. And it's really for us to adapt, adopt, and play it forward. Thank you very much, and really appreciate the opportunity to address all of you. Thank you.